The sun over Ouagadougou rose like a blazing copper shield, washing the city in a glow that felt both ancient and prophetic. The hum of engines, the distant cadence of marching boots, and the rhythmic beating of military drums filled the air. Burkina Faso was awake, alert, and preparing for something that would reshape the continent's future. Rumors had spread for months, whispers of an alliance forming, quietly, strategically, and far from the eyes of those who once controlled the political pulse of Africa. But no one expected what was about to unfold. Not Europe, not the United States, not the analysts who had once believed the Sahel to be a region best defined by instability, and certainly not the network of foreign policymakers who assumed Burkina Faso would remain within the sphere of Western influence. But the world had changed. A new diplomatic order was emerging, and Burkina Faso was no longer waiting for permission. Inside a heavily fortified compound, its walls lined with red Sahelian stone and reinforced steel, the highest-ranking officials of Burkina Faso gathered around a long table. Maps, satellite photos, and strategic documents covered its surface. Every face in the room carried the expression of someone standing at the edge of a new frontier. At the head of the table stood the young military leader whose rise had stunned the world. His uniform bore the desert dust of the field, not the polished shine of a ceremonial commander. His voice carried the weight of a nation, and his presence was enough to command absolute silence. In a world that doubts Africa, he began, we will prove that Africa is capable not just of defending itself, but of leading the transformation of global military strategy. His speech was not rehearsed. It didn't need to be. Every person present knew the stakes. The door opened. A tall man in a crisp suit entered, followed by a group of engineers, advisors, and defense specialists. Their badges bore the flag of a rising Asian superpower, one that saw opportunity not in domination, but in partnership. India had arrived. The lead diplomat bowed respectfully, offering a gesture that carried centuries of cultural meaning. It is an honor to stand with a nation that has chosen sovereignty over submission. The Burkina Faso officials nodded. They knew India's involvement was not casual. This was part of a new geopolitical strategy, a global realignment where emerging nations recognized each other's struggle, ambition, and potential. The meeting began. India presented blueprints of joint military academies, drone development facilities, and advanced surveillance systems. The plans were ambitious. A full transformation of Burkina Faso's defense structure by 2025, integrating artificial intelligence, satellite mapping, and indigenous weapons production. What shocked many observers was not the technology itself, but the terms. Unlike the Western powers that once soaked Africa in exploitative agreements, India offered something unprecedented: full technology transfer, joint command structures, shared ownership of military innovations. No political strings, no hidden clauses, no colonial undertones. The room buzzed with energy as engineers discussed anti-drone systems, desert-adapted armored vehicles, and a new generation of tactical units built specifically for Sahelian warfare. But behind the excitement lay a deeper strategic truth. India saw the writing on the wall. The Sahel was becoming the center of a new global chessboard. Russia had strengthened its ties in the region. China was investing heavily in infrastructure and security. And the West, once the master of African affairs, was losing ground. Burkina Faso was no longer a pawn. It had become a power. And India was not simply offering help. It was offering a partnership that would alter the global balance. Outside the compound, crowds gathered along the streets, waving flags and chanting in excitement. Youths beat drums as a convoy of military vehicles, adorned with both nations' insignias, rolled through the capital. For many Burkinabe citizens, this moment symbolized something deeper than military modernization. It symbolized liberation from a past of foreign manipulation. Meanwhile, across oceans, shockwaves rippled. In Washington, analysts stared at live satellite feeds in disbelief. The Pentagon held emergency briefings. A senior official muttered, "How did we miss this?" In Paris, panic was more pronounced. Newspapers blasted headlines across front pages. A new alliance in the Sahel, France caught off guard. Politicians scrambled to explain how a nation they once considered dependent had formed a deep military alliance that excluded all Western powers. Some officials blamed shifts in global politics. Some blamed the loss of influence. Others blamed their failure to respect Burkina Faso's sovereignty. But deep down, they all knew the truth. They underestimated a nation that had learned to stand for itself. The second phase of the alliance unfolded at a remote training base in the northern region, where Indian officers arrived in desert-pattern uniforms, eager to begin operational integration. One of them, a seasoned commander with decades of counterinsurgency experience, observed the Burkinabe soldiers with quiet admiration. "They fight with courage," he whispered to one of his deputies. "But with our new systems, their capabilities will double." Drones buzzed overhead as training simulations began. Burkina Faso soldiers practiced intercepting rogue drones, coordinating armored units, and launching precision strikes using real-time satellite data relayed directly from Indian orbital systems. In the command tent, screens flickered with digital maps. A Burkinabe officer moved aside as an Indian specialist loaded advanced software into the new battlefield management system. "This," the Indian engineer explained, "will give you an operational advantage even superpowers admire." The officer nodded, understanding the magnitude of what was happening. For the first time in its history, Burkina Faso was stepping into the rank of nations with truly modern warfare capabilities. But the cooperation was not only technological. India also committed to building a massive military academy in Kédougou, a school designed to train Africa's next generation of commanders. The academy would include virtual war rooms, AI-assisted strategy labs, and programs dedicated to African-centered defense philosophy. No longer would Burkina Faso rely on foreign doctrines that ignored the realities of the Sahel. The academy's motto was chosen carefully: "We train for Africa, by Africa." The announcement of the academy sent shockwaves across Western think tanks, where experts struggled to understand why India was investing so heavily in a region once considered under exclusive Western influence. But the answer was simple. Burkina Faso had earned global respect, and India recognized the value of building alliances with nations that stood fiercely for their sovereignty. Back in Ouagadougou, a massive rally formed at Revolution Square. Thousands gathered as their leader took the stage to speak about the transformation underway. His voice thundered through the air. "We were once told that Africa must beg for protection. Today, we build our own protection. We build alliances on respect, not submission. We rise with partners who see us as equals." The crowd erupted in applause. Moments later, a group of Indian engineers joined him on stage. Their presence symbolized a powerful new chapter, one where Asia and Africa work together outside Western control. The leader continued, "Our partnership is not a threat to the world. It is a threat only to those who believed Africa must remain weak." That line struck like lightning. And far away, in Western capitals, it was heard loud and clear. The transformation continued rapidly. Joint factories began assembling armored personnel carriers designed for desert warfare. Burkina Faso engineers received training in Bangalore to master coding for AI-based surveillance. Indian specialists helped build underground bunkers shielded from drone attacks, while joint teams drafted a new national cybersecurity strategy. By late 2024, Burkina Faso's military was evolving faster than any Western intelligence agency had predicted, and the West, despite its power, could do nothing but watch. For the first time in modern history, Africa was writing the rules of its own defense partnerships, and this was only the beginning. The sun dipped behind the jagged silhouettes of the Sahel as the final convoy rolled into Ouagadougou's newly expanded defense innovation zone. Floodlights bathed the compound in a stark white glow, reflecting off the polished hulls of armored patrol vehicles and experimental drone carriers. The air buzzed faintly, machinery, generators, distant turbines. Yet beneath the noise was a palpable shift in Africa's geopolitical pulse. Inside the Strategic Command Center, Commander Karim Sari stood before a massive digital map that flickered in shades of red, yellow, and blue. In just 8 months, the military alliance had evolved from a bold announcement into a living, operational force reshaping power dynamics across the region. Beside him, India's lead defense strategist, Brigadier Irvin Pratap, watched intently, arms folded behind his back. Both men shared the same realization. They were building something that would echo far beyond the nation's borders, an axis of empowerment that many had dismissed as improbable. The systems hummed to life. Satellite feeds from northern Burkina Faso displayed formations of newly trained rapid response units. Their discipline was evident. Their precision was unmistakable. For decades, outside forces had dictated what African nations could or could not become. Now, for the first time, Burkina Faso was rewriting the script, with a partner that did not seek to control its future, but to co-engineer it. Commander Karim tapped a point on the map. Sector 14 stabilization confirmed. Within 72 hours, the corridor will be fully secure. Pratap nodded. And Phase 3. Karim exhaled slowly. We begin tomorrow. This will change everything. Beyond the command center walls, a quiet storm brewed over continents. In private boardrooms and parliament chambers thousands of miles away, analysts scrambled to understand how a landlocked nation had become the new epicenter of military innovation. Traditional powers watched with a mix of disbelief and frustration, realizing too late that the geopolitical chessboard had been rearranged, and they were no longer making the first move. Meanwhile, African nations observed with growing admiration. A shift was unfolding, a model of partnership free from coercion, built on technological exchange, respect, and strategic balance. Rumors had spread that several neighboring states were in talks to join the new defense consortium shaped by the Burkina Faso-India collaboration. For many, this alliance was not merely political, it was symbolic. It signaled the rise of an Africa that defined its own doctrines, dictated its own alliances, and chose its own future. At dawn the next morning, an aircraft sliced through the sky, descending toward the desert training grounds near Dori. As its wheels touched the sand-reinforced runway, a gust of dust billowed behind. Emerging from the plane were engineers, cyber defense specialists, and tactical advisors. Their mission: integrate the next phase of the joint military transformation. Karim arrived moments later in a desert-hardened command rover. He approached the arriving team, exchanging firm handshakes with the lead specialist, Dr. Satya Mehra, a brilliant mind who had spearheaded several of India's most advanced remote warfare technologies. What we begin today, Mehra said, adjusting her tactical vest, will create one of the most sophisticated counterinsurgency networks in the region. Karim's eyes narrowed with ambition. Not just the region. The world will study what we build here. The training fields erupted with motion. Recruits sprinted through obstacle courses while drone operators navigated swarms through simulated war zones. Tanks rolled across the dunes, kicking up dust clouds that swallowed the horizon. Integrated command hubs tested battlefield communications resistant to jamming tactics once used by hostile factions. Cyber units infiltrated dummy networks modeled after known extremist communication patterns. This level of synchronization was unprecedented. Burkina Faso was no longer copying strategies from foreign militaries. It was designing its own doctrine, one rooted in local terrains, local threats, and the lived experience of its people. Hours later, as the desert wind calmed and the sky dimmed into twilight, Karim gathered with Pratap, Mehra, and the Joint Operations Council around a circular holographic display. Its blue projection illuminated their faces like a glowing fire in the dark. We are entering the defining stage, Pratap said. Phase 3 is more than training or technology distribution. It is the moment this alliance becomes irreversible. Karim leaned forward. And the world will finally understand that Africa is no longer the battleground of outside agendas, but the architect of its own destiny. Before anyone could respond, an encrypted alert flashed across the hologram. A deep crimson symbol pulsed, an intruder signal. The room turned silent. What is that? Mehra asked. The technician zoomed in. It was a drone signature. Unknown. High altitude. Moving slowly over the Sahel corridor. This isn't one of ours, the technician said. And the flight path, it originates from outside West Africa. Karim's jaw tightened. They're testing us. The Western intelligence community had been unusually quiet in recent months as the alliance grew. Too quiet. Pratap stepped back. Activate counter-tracking. We need to know which nation launched that drone. The technician worked quickly, intercepting the signal's frequency. The encryption was sophisticated, layered, deliberate, designed to mask its origin. But the new cybersecurity grid built through the alliance peeled it apart one layer at a time. A location appeared. The room froze. It was a base in the Mediterranean zone known to be used by a major European power. Karim's expression sharpened. They are beginning to panic. Pratap placed a hand on the table. This confirms what we already knew. They feel threatened by the rise of African independence. Mara tapped the hologram. Then Phase 3 is no longer an upgrade. It is a necessity. The Council agreed. Across the next several days, the alliance accelerated its plans. Burkinabe engineers traveled to India for advanced aerospace training. Indian cyber officers embedded within the Sahel command hub. Knowledge exchange intensified, and by the start of the new month, the foundations of an autonomous regional defense network had been completed. The shift was so dramatic that several Western intelligence briefings leaked to global media, revealing internal concerns. Headlines soared. A new military axis is emerging in Africa. India deepens strategic foothold in the Sahel. Burkina Faso becomes the unexpected anchor of regional transformation. But what caught the world most off guard was not the alliance itself. It was the level of unity behind it. For decades, African nations had been portrayed as divided, unstable, or perpetually reliant on foreign powers. Now, one partnership shattered that narrative, and it was doing so with vision, strategy, and continental support. Back in Ouagadougou, the final stage of Phase 3 approached completion. The Defense Innovation Zone buzzed with activity as new aerial defense towers were erected, sensor arrays calibrated, and the Central Command AI integrated. Karim stood on a balcony overlooking the entire facility. The wind carried the faint smell of steel, sand, and ambition. Moments later, Pratap joined him. "You realize," Pratap said quietly, "what we have built will be studied for decades. Your country is creating a new paradigm." Karim nodded. "And it is only the beginning." Down below, hundreds of Burkinabe soldiers marched in formation, each step perfectly synchronized. Their discipline reflected more than training. It reflected belief. Belief in sovereignty. Belief in collective strength. Belief that Africa was rising on its own terms. Suddenly, a sharp alarm pierced the air. An urgent transmission popped onto the command display. Karim rushed inside. "Report. Unidentified aircraft entering our airspace." Two of them. Operators scrambled to analyze the signatures. The aircraft were circling, watching, probing. They were unmanned, silent, and cloaked in advanced stealth tech. Karim exhaled slowly. "They're escalating." Pratap stepped forward. "Then we meet escalation with capability." Within minutes, the new Joint Defense Grid came online. Tracking beams locked onto the intruding aircraft. Algorithms calculated interception routes, and automated aerial units scrambled from underground launch tubes across the desert. This was the first real test. The world had been watching the alliance with skepticism, intrigue, and quiet fear. But now, it would witness something unprecedented, an African nation defending its airspace with a system it had helped design. As the aerial units approached the intruders, encrypted warnings were transmitted. The intruders ignored them. Karim gave the order. Moments later, the skies erupted with a shimmering arc of electromagnetic pulses. The intruders flickered, lost altitude, and vanished from radar, forced to retreat before they were exposed. The room burst into applause. It wasn't victory, it was validation. Burkina Faso had announced itself to the world. No longer vulnerable. No longer underestimated. No longer dependent. The alliance had delivered not just military transformation, but global respect. As dawn broke over the Sahel the next day, newspapers across Africa carried the same headline. A new power rises where none expected it. And in quiet corners of the world where old empires whispered warnings to each other, one truth became impossible to ignore. Africa had entered a new era. An era of bold alliances, sovereign strength, and unwavering self-determination. And it all began with a partnership the world never took seriously, until it was too late.